Beyond that lens of personality that serves as a filter for our social world are all the sensations and information that come to us from it. We're social creatures, and our social world consists of concentric rings of people that we spend more and more time with as they get closer and closer to us. The time we've spent recently in isolation has underscored that somewhat. Those rings collapse down to only the most important and most frequent people in our lives. But those outer rings of digital data coming from our world remained a pervasive, constant bandwidth. It's a virtual and literal fire hose of data that's been pouring out at us every day that has changed little since we reduced our face-to-face or mask-to-mask interactions to near zero. You see, social pruning is very easy these days. Someone disagrees with a post, unfriend them. A friend doesn't support your all-oxygen diet? Block them. Unsubscribe, unfollow, and uninvolve. Meanwhile, the great algorithm in the sky sorts for what we do like and narrows the data stream to fit our happy little world. You get to be king of a world where everyone agrees with you.
Precisely. Champagne would fall from the heavens, doors would open, velvet robes would part.
But it's not real, Nick. It's an algorithmically tuned designer drug targeting our egos. In the days and months since this all started, I believe we've seen a returning polarization to the narrative. Any narrative. It doesn't seem to matter what's coming up in our public discourse. People are still, for a lack of a better word, radicalizing in either direction. Not to say everybody is running out to the extreme right or left, but the middle ground does seem to be clearing. So, why does each side seem so entrenched? Why don't they see what's going on from your point of view? Why don't they listen to reason? It does seem to be partially about personality, but it's also about our relationships and how we access and use information. See, in science fiction and artificial intelligence research, people worry machines will evolve based on the inputs we give them. In the worst case scenario, our machine overlords turn on us based on what they learn about humanity. In the field of artificial intelligence, we are learning a lot about inputs, specifically how inputs can change results and how unintended bias can be an acquired trait, even in machine learning. Now let me give you an example. For a couple of years, I worked with sex offenders, one of the populations even counselors have difficulty working with and understanding. In that time, I learned nearly all of them share one common factor that bears directly on our current circumstances, one that led to the thinking and behavior of their offense. In a word, isolation. Nearly every one of them had reduced their social contacts down to an echo chamber that would permit them to violate morals, ethics, and laws. They would often isolate themselves from anyone who would stand up and tell them, "Hey, that's wrong." They would stop communicating with anyone who would cause them to feel badly about what they were thinking or doing. Some would even try to hide the way they felt and acted from themselves, even long after they'd been convicted, covering it with a thick, creamy denial of their own personal narrative. This social constriction, or pruning, was paired with a sometimes staggering increase in media consumption that supported and reinforced their developing worldview. In this case, pornography that normalized their behavior. Now this forms a reinforcement loop, like Pavlov and his dogs. Here, instead of eating kibble and ringing a bell, we have a troubling behavior and a black box that normalizes behavior and soothes the subject from any distress they might be feeling about it. That black box is the internet, their data feed, whatever. In olden times, it would have been stacks of videotapes, binders full of women, or magazines they only read for the articles. They would hit that box whenever they needed a little dopamine bump, a little heavy petting to let them feel that they're okay. This is kind of an extreme example of confirmation bias, the tendency to locate, create, and recall only the information that supports what we already believe. We work to construct a belief about our world that protects and directs us. We can't help it. We are pattern-seeking creatures. We crave making connections and making sense of things. Just try and walk past a puzzle with only one piece left. That's how a lot of optical illusions work as well. We look for what fits. Even if it's not there, it's in our nature, and it's how our brains are designed. Our brains want to fill in gaps. As with optical illusions, once you see it one way, you just can't unsee it. You may be able to see it another way, but the original is still there. We don't want to be wrong any more than we want to be scared. Being right is satisfying. Challenging thoughts, beliefs, and actions is hard, especially if people were hurt along the way. Ask any sex offender. Confirmation biases are only one of the ways that cognitive psychology shapes what we experience, feel, and know. Click this link down below for an awareness test to measure what's called your Attentional Spotlight. The link will also be in the description below. It's a little over a minute, but a great example. So I'll give you a minute. Did you pass the awareness check? It should illustrate how sometimes people just can't see things the same way, depending on what we've been told and what we believe. That is the Attentional Spotlight, another cognitive piece of hardware that kind of shows how private logic works. Now, private logic is a big bubble wrap of our self-image, what we believe about the world, and what we think life requires of us. It has the internal logic of a physics engine that we built ourselves as we experience the world from infancy up to today. Simultaneously both experimenting with and evaluating the world around us to develop a better model of how life works from our own experience.
Water's wet, sky's blue, women have secrets.
It's called Asif Reasoning, as it bases behavior on a sometimes fictional, hidden argument. Not that kind of argument, a logical argument. Logical arguments have a structure. It looks like this and this. Logical arguments are again patterns. They make sense and have a logical flow. They are satisfying in that way, but are clearly not always true. But it is a pattern of belief based on what we have found through our own experience or trial and error. But that belief is so ingrained, it's not usually conscious. Yet it tries to answer some really big questions. Who am I? How does the world work? What is my role here? And why aren't there any save points? Here is a kind of simple parable that shows how an unspoken belief can shape family identity and create an unconscious, even contagious conviction based all on a fictional argument. A little girl comes home from school one day and sees her mother making a pot roast. Her mother puts it in the pan, cuts the ends off, and throws them away. The little girl asks, "Why?" And the mother responds, "That's the way we do it, because that's the way my mother always did it." Curious, the little girl calls her grandmother, and after the usual pleasantries asks why she cut off the ends of the roast before cooking it. Her grandmother responded, "That's the way we do it, because that's the way my mother always did it." Unfulfilled and undeterred, the little girl called her great-grandmother in a nursing home. Again, after the usual pleasantries, the girl asked her question. Instead of the usual answer she'd been hearing, her grandmother replied, "When I was first married, I only had a very small roast pan. In order to get the roast to fit, I would cut off the ends. When your great-grandfather got me a bigger pan, I didn't have to do that anymore." You see, we all have a private logic that tells us a story we believe about us and our world. It tries to answer the central questions of who am I, how does this world work, and what is my role? In this story, the unwritten argument could be, you have to cut off the ends to get the roast to cook right. Or, in this family, we do as we're told, and we don't ask questions. In other cases, it could be, you have to work hard to get ahead, Or, even if I work hard, I won't get ahead because of X. Whatever. Whether it's because you think the Jews control Hollywood, or that lining your apartment with aluminum foil keeps the radio waves out, it may just be where you're at in your career, Mel. In some cases, your online experience with the product may differ, may not be rated for content by the ASRB, or may not be being used as intended. But again, this logic is a pattern of belief that conditions our responses, and a narrow media stream is a great conditioning tool. It makes tools. It's a tool for establishing a pattern of behavior. Look, it comes down to this. It can be a repetitive stress injury for your brain that's self-inflicted if we don't check ourselves. Maybe we should just give up this banter tennis after all. That's all I'm saying. Look at your usage. Is it reasonable and productive, rational and inclusive? Look at Jane Elliot and the blue eyes, brown eyes experiment. It's a very old example. And that was in a school, listening to a teacher, a few hours, over 2 days. Who listens to teachers anymore? I know, I've been one. And when is the last time you've gone 2 days without trolling your feed? That sweet, sweet nectar of a custom synthesized, algorithmically tweaked, high-end stream of your own bespoke digital dopamine, blasting out loud and proud 24/7.
And they're cool, available, and addictive. The job is almost done for us.
So, what do? We are clearly in a time of change. The question is, how do we manage it? This channel is supposed to be about doables. So, wise guy, what do? First, start in your own head. Turn down the noise a bit. Listen and stop waiting to talk. Understand thinking differently doesn't make anybody evil or stupid, and name-calling is just childish. Use your words and find ones to fit how you feel and why. Listen when the other guy does the same. Shh, I said listen. Some people are disagreeable, unbalanced, or even volatile to varying degrees. But one of the biggest challenges we face today is in being open to experience. We have to be able to take in new information and change our minds when the world does not fit our own private logic. Even in matters of personality, research shows we can learn, grow, and change. We can learn to be more open, more conscientious, even more agreeable and less reactionary, if we're willing to put in the work. We need to learn to recognize when we are being inflexible, locking out other viewpoints, and especially question our own perceptions and beliefs. We can learn to be better stewards of our world and how we let it affect us. The world will move on, with or without us, if we don't try and keep up. Just ask Lestat, or this guy.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
The oldest and most powerful piece of conflict resolution advice I can find is this. No nation has ever benefited from prolonged warfare. Was that Gandhi? The Dalai Lama? MLK? Nope. That's Sun Tzu in The Art of War. Even he knew conflict must be a last resort, and that to remain in conflict is a loss for both sides that eventually makes it not worth winning. You may think this doesn't apply, but what I see is a hostile conflict over dispersive or contested ground and weapons in our streets. Escalation doesn't solve problems. Question assumptions. Look at where beliefs come from. Start with yours. Be curious when you don't understand. Take responsibility and look at people and personalities you listen to. Are they looking to reduce conflict, consider alternatives, and solve problems? Are they stable and reliable? The quickest way to victory is the one that ends the fight. Laying in an endless siege or prolonged conflict is just losing in slow motion. Change is inevitable, it's coming, and it's traumatic. there are some painful splinters in our paw, and they have to come out. It is going to be uncomfortable, even painful. Talk it out. Try to learn something, and we'll all get through this. Build yourself a bigger pan and stop throwing away the roast. Thank you. Now, if you watch these videos and we seem like a fit, feel free to drop me a line. If I'm not your cup of tea or not in your area, I can help you source somebody who is with a referral. As always, like, subscribe, and share so that we can see where this maniacal tuned car of mental health is headed. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Pouring out of us every day that has changed little as we do dooby-dooby-doo. Those rings collapse down somewhat. I can't read my own stuff sometimes. Once more from the top, this time with feeling. I just want to say that in this entire episode, it's been very difficult not to get upset, to try and maintain an even keel, to try and not paint anybody as the bad guy. I think there are clearly some bad guys in this. But it's not about trying to fix blame. It's about trying to fix problems. And anything that takes us away from that goal is hurting people.